Now, my next guest is an evolutionary behavioural scientist and author of the international bestseller, The Parasitic Mind, How Infectious Ideas Are Killing Common Sense. He also has a new book coming out this July entitled The Saad Truth About Happiness. Here to give his insight on the damage that the radical left wing are doing to society is Canadian professor Gad Saad. Professor, thank you so much for your time. Let's start in the world of academia. The president of Cornell University has announced that free expression would be the theme for the academic year. But, I mean, that's wonderful. But she also wants to promote DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, just as strongly as free expression. Can those two things happily coexist on a university campus?
Certainly not in the way that those folks define diversity, inclusion, and equity. What makes the scientific process so beautiful is that it frees us from the shackles of our personal identity. So I don't do Lebanese Jewish evolutionary psychology. I just do evolutionary psychology. There is no indigenous mathematics. There's just mathematics. That's why the scientific method is the great epistemological democratizing force that it is. And so, no, you can't have the scientific method, you can't have meritocracy, you can't have freedom of speech as long as the diversity, inclusion, and equity cult is moving forward.
Well, Cornell is one of your old universities. You have been there, you've seen it firsthand. I'm sure it's changed a little bit since your time there. But what sort of impact are these DEI strategies and philosophy really having on university campuses? And is there a way we can undo some of that damage, or is the rot too deep now?
Well, I'd like to wake up every morning optimistic that we can still make a change. Otherwise, there'd be no point in me getting out of bed. So I do think that we can, affect the change. But look, the rot, as you say, is everywhere. So, for example, I have taken the very regrettable decision of not to apply for the next round of scientific grants because I can't bring myself, Rita, to fill out those diversity, inclusion, and equity statements. I would feel that I would be a fraud. I would be inauthentic. How could I, from this side of my mouth, rail against all the nonsense of diversity, inclusion, and equity? And yet, when it comes to my careerist advancement, then I play along. And so here I am, a professor for nearly 30 years who's, published a lot, who's been very productive, who I've taken the willful decision of not applying for a grant because of diversity, inclusion, and equity. So now take my situation, multiply it by 100,000 different ways, and you get a complete cancerous rot. It's grotesque, and I hope that we'll be able to defeat it soon.
And how crazy, because you are actually a very ethnically diverse individual. So you're precisely the type of individual that they say they want to help. But of course, we know it's all about groupthink, not genuine diversity, certainly not diversity of thought. Now, you've been very vocal about the issue of biological males who identify as transgender women competing in women's sport. You recently tweeted in your typically droll style saying, "It's truly unfair when biological males who self-identify as women are not allowed to crush the dreams and aspirations of biological females. What is the world coming to when biological males can't defeat biological females in a women's competition?" Now, this was in response to this bit of far-left activism masquerading as journalism from Reuters. Let's have a quick look.
The 21-year-old has been training hard to improve her timings in the 200-meter. But as a transgender woman, her hopes were dashed in March when the World Athletics Council banned athletes like her from competing in women's events.
The council has agreed to exclude male to female transgender athletes.
WA President Sebastian Coe cited a common refrain, the need to protect the female category, a frequently used justification for the outright exclusion of trans women from athletic competition. The ban has left DU feeling marginalized and hounded.
Enfin, même si on est une minorité, enfin, on mérite de vivre libre, de mener une vie libre, quoi. On mérite de faire des compétitions et de courir notamment dans la catégorie qui est la nôtre. Et on nous refuse cela, quoi. Enfin, le seul garde-fou que les femmes trans bénéficient, c'est le droit de vivre, le droit de vivre libre. Et on leur refuse cela. Pour moi, c'est de l'acharnement, quoi. Ouais, je comprends pas trop.
The victim playing is just reaching all sorts of new levels. Why do you think the media is so captured by this trans ideology, where they've pretty much given up any pretense of impartiality or even just, acknowledging scientific facts?
Right. So it's misplaced compassion, right? So national borders are racist because you don't allow noble people from Guatemala to get into your country. Clearly, you must be a Nazi if you have integral borders. Putting a bad criminal in prison is really bad, and you should be more compassionate toward him, because clearly if he's a serial rapist, it must be society that failed him. Same mechanism applies for transgender folks. Look, I'm all for transgender people living lives free of bigotry, but that doesn't mean that we get to celebrate their unique personhood by destroying the dreams and ambitions of 100 other athletes called biological women. So it's a case of misplaced orgiastic compassion that is being targeted in the wrong places. And by the way, all of this nonsense only starts because you allow the granddaddy of all idea pathogens, which I discuss in the Parasitic Mind, which is postmodernism, to flourish, right? Postmodernism says that there are no objective truths other than the one objective truth, that there are no objective truths. Therefore, using the magical wand of the trans prefix, voila, I can take a man with a 9-inch penis and he suddenly becomes a woman simply by identifying himself as a woman. And if you say anything against that, then you're a bigot. It has to end. It can't make sense that in the 21st century, we are having these types of conversations. Even the folks that were involved in the Salem witch hunts 400 years ago were not this insane. This has to stop, and we must return to reason.